I'm Kim M. Reynolds, and I am a writer, a critical media scholar, and an artist. I am from Cincinnati, Ohio, born and raised, and have been living in Cape Town, South Africa for the past 4 years. And like many artists and many writers, I come to my practice and my craft through personal experiences. And so I came to text and came to working with words through music, actually. Music and lyrics were the first place or somewhat of gateways into imagination, imagining worlds that were more interesting, more flexible, and redundantly more imaginative than the world that we have on our hands, which is a world that is overdetermined by violence and by white supremacy and all of its byproducts. And so lyrics and music and particularly my favorites around Stevie Wonder and Roberta Flack really started opening up those doors for me. And I think Sun Ra's artistry really exemplifies that. He talked extensively about how he explored all these other worlds, all these other realms through his artistry because they were more tenable than earth for Black people specifically. And so I think text has that capacity to be imaginative. In my work, specifically critical media analysis, it finds itself and it is rooted in a Black feminist praxis. And to clarify what critical media analysis is, it's generally an academic practice, an academic methodology to extract meaning, to understand narratives, but it's in essence a way to identify how certain meanings, how certain narratives are naturalized and who they privilege. And so for me, I'm interested in understanding how discourse is a fundamental part of the colonial project, has been and continues to be. How discourse and popular imagery materialize into the world. They come out and turn into policy. They turn into material conditions. So my work is really interested in identifying those kinds of colonial scripts and how they materialize and how they continue to police and restrict the lives that society and white supremacy have deemed as lesser than. And I identify my canon of Black feminism kind of in my upbringing and my education, which has been the Black American feminist canon, and the queer canon and canon that again deals with anti-imperialism. And my biggest influences, I guess I would count as Nikki Giovanni and June Jordan. But with this approach, I look at the centrality of policing and how policing is really central to meaning, how the policing of speech, action, dress, behavior remains fundamental to how society functions and deems who's worthy of life, and particularly how Black women, Black femmes, and Black queer people continue to be the subject of policing, and what that really reveals about the world that we live in, and how these kinds of ideas get adopted and reshaped in so many different contexts. We see them, played out quite plainly in the United States, and then we see them played out in the Caribbean, where my father's from, as very colonial ideas around sexuality that gets, reshaped as a rejection of the West, that queerness is a Western thing when it's quite literally a colonial import, homophobia and transphobia. And lastly, my work is Black and it's feminist because it's collaborative. Writing and text-based work is often thought of as something that's done in solitude, but I think the deepest meaning that we find is in community, in our chosen community, which isn't an easy thing to do and to find. But I work with other educators, other artists, other cultural workers because I think meaning is derived from many lenses. And so while writing can be done in solitary, it gains meaning and depth when done with others. I arrive at text because I think it has this ability to create other worlds and to also be very silly and serious. And I take that from Maya Angelou. In an interview, she described what she would say to her daughter if she had one, and she said, "I would tell that daughter to laugh at the silliest things and to be very serious." And I think that text has in an imaginative and a silly and serious way, has the capacity to interrupt this way that we're continually taught to read, which is largely through comprehension. Did you get it? But sometimes comprehension relies on consensus, a shared and understanding meaning, which obscures other kinds of truths, other kinds of meanings. And so, for example, in an American context, the reading or the comprehension of patriotism means a very specific thing. It means a commitment to the United States. It's generally a respect for authority and military. It is a belief in the supremacy and excellence of the United States, which obscures other readings of patriotism, which can be, a commitment to the United States, but a commitment to this narrative of the United States that sanitizes genocide, that that is adherent to authority, that is reliant on policing as a fundamental block of the United States and so many other societies, policing of people, policing of the gender binary, policing of land, policing of shame, policing of humanity. And so, text has the opportunity in an imaginative way to turn things on its head and to, open a cracked door and to invite interrogation and antagonism into our thinking processes as a way to imagine better. And so, my work, my text-based work, which takes the shape of poetry, short fiction, as well as installations or visuals of marked up texts, aims to attend to this relationship between antagonism and imagination, identifying colonial scripts, identifying which narratives privilege who, what power structures are at play and what is continually relied on, using those kinds of identifications, using that kind of antagonism to imagine better. And I think that also produces a very specific kind of intimacy that allows us to see each other. And particularly when I say us, I'm talking about Black people, and for me, as a Black American who lives in South Africa, there's this understanding that the point of understanding or sharing isn't a singular answer. It's not a homogenization. It's not that one will ever get it, to the ends of getting something or someone or a culture. Or a canon or a literary canon or anything like that, but that we get closer and closer to seeing one another. We see overlaps, but we don't, attempt to force them and to only derive meaning from those things.